Bubba Wallace speaks to media for the first time since returning from his suspension. Ross Chastain pulls off one of the most impressive moves in NASCAR history, and Ty Gibbs intentionally dumps Brandon Jones. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start off by talking about Joe Gibbs Racing. Now, with Cristobal picking up the victory at Martinsville, Joe Gibbs Racing has now reached 200 career Cup Series victories, with Cristobal winning the race. Huge congratulations to Joe Gibbs Racing. Of course, their first one came in the 1993 Daytona 500. They've won a lot of championships now, and to see him get 200 Cup Series victories is incredible. Huge congratulations, Joe Gibbs Racing, on now having 200 career victories in the Cup Series. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Martinsville. As it was announced today that Martinsville had sold out for the Cup race earlier today or yesterday. This is the first time since 2006 that Martinsville has sold out. Absolutely incredible. I think a lot of people are really hyped up and intrigued. And of course, seeing a lot of races this year sold out. I think we've had 6 or 7 races all together this year that have sold out. So that's absolutely incredible. Really amazing to see. And congratulations to Martinsville having a sellout crowd this weekend. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the helmet cam. As Brad Keselowski posted on his Twitter a couple days ago, showing the helmet cam during practice and qualifying and being a big advocate for the helmet cam. Now, we've seen more of the helmet cam over the last couple years, and I believe the helmet cam is going to be something that is mandatory by either 2025 or 2026, which a lot of drivers have really been advocating for. I love this helmet cam. It shows a lot of great things, and I cannot wait to see helmet cam to be around a lot more in the future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ty Gibbs. Now, Ty Gibbs obviously won the NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday. We're going to be talking about him in the later portion of this episode. But Ty Gibbs picked up his 10th career NASCAR Xfinity Series victory a couple days ago at Martinsville. He is the youngest driver in NASCAR Xfinity Series history to pick up 10 career NASCAR Xfinity Series victories in a short amount of time. This is absolutely incredible. Ty Gibbs, whether you like him or not, he is a very talented driver, but sometimes can drive way over his head. But this is a really cool stat. Congratulations to Ty Gibbs on picking up his 10th career Xfinity victory and being the youngest driver to do that in the Xfinity Series. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Ferrari. As it was revealed, I believe, on Friday afternoon or Saturday morning, that the 2023 Ferrari Hypercar has been officially revealed. I have to say this Hypercar looks absolutely incredible. Of course, it will be debuting in the World Endurance Championship next year in 2023. This looks absolutely incredible, and I absolutely love it. I cannot wait to see it on a racetrack in 2023. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chevy. As it was announced on Friday that Chevy has already clinched the 2022 NASCAR Cup Series Manufacturers title. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the 41st time that Chevy has won the Cup Series Manufacturers title, and they've won it, I think, the last 2 or 3 straight years. Massive congratulations to Chevy. Chevy has been the most dominant manufacturer in NASCAR history, so it's not a major surprise they won, but still, massive congratulations to them on winning the manufacturer's title. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about Stephen Noss. As on Saturday evening was the 2022 All-American 400. I believe they were supposed to have that race earlier in the week, but they moved that back just a little bit. And Stephen Noss was able to win the 2022 All-American 400. I believe while battling for the lead, there were it was like a 3-car pileup on the front stretch, and he was able to cruise a victory after some issues on the racetrack. Massive congratulations to Stephen Noss on picking up the victory in the All-American 400 and getting a really awesome dub. He gets another victory. I think he won it last year as well, so another big win for Stephen Noss. Massive congratulations to him on winning our 2022 All-American 400. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jordan Anderson. Now, Jordan Anderson has been speaking to media over the last couple of days, including NBC Sports and Bob Pockrass, and he's been speaking about the fire. First, he spoke to Dustin Long and basically hopes to run that same truck that he ran basically in the Talladega fire. He's hoping to basically run that truck next year in the 2023 Truck Series Daytona opener, as that's the same truck they ran to finishing second in the opener of Daytona. Jordan Anderson is a very talented driver. Of course, he suffered a really, really bad accident where he suffered a little bit of degree burns. He's been returning to track more frequently, so that's been really, really good to see. And I'm definitely for sure really happy to see that he is back at the racetrack and good to see that he is recovering. He's hoping to use that truck in the near future, so hopefully he does and gets to run this. I'd definitely love to see him race again. It won't be racing anymore in 2022, but he's hoping to run it in 2023, and hopefully he's able to go ahead and do that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about AJ Allmendinger. As AJ Allmendinger is going to drive a 16 for Kaulig Racing in the Cup Series next weekend at Phoenix. Originally, Noah Gragson was going to drive the 16 car, but that's because he thought he'd be in the 16 car, but they made changes after it was announced that Alex Bowman will, of course, will be returning to 48 next week, which we'll talk about here in the not-so-distant future. And Noah can, of course, then also focus on trying to win the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series Championship this year. AJ is getting a lot of experience, and generally AJ has been very, very solid. Of course, didn't have a great run in the Cup Series earlier today, but he's a driver I expect really big things from, and getting that experience in the Cup Series makes a lot of sense. Happy to see that AJ is going to be getting a lot more experience in the 16 car for Kaulig Racing. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Red Bull Racing. As officially it was announced, and Red Bull has been penalized by the FIA. They have been penalized $7 million and 10% reduction in car development time for budget cap breach. For those who do not know, multiple teams, I believe Red Bull and Aston Martin basically breached the budget cap that they were allowed to spend. I think that Red Bull did it more than Aston Martin. They breached the budget cap, and they got penalized pretty heavily. This could have Red Bull heading into 2023. Of course, Red Bull's already locked up not only the championship and the manufacturer's title, but they also have a constructor's title, but they've also won the driver's championship as well with Max Verstappen. This is probably going to hurt him heading into 2023, but they need to be penalized. Some people thought they were going to lose their 2021 championship, but they did not end up losing the 2021 championship over that. Now they're back-to-back champions regardless, and of course Max Verstappen is going to be completely dominant this year. He's been incredible, and it's a shame that Red Bull got penalized for what they did, but if you're basically cheating and get trouble for it, exceeding your budget cap, regardless of what you do, you should be penalized. So I think it's the right call in my opinion, and glad they got penalized. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Leigh Diffey. As it was reported by Octagon that Leigh Diffey has signed a multi-year contract extension with NBC to continue work at NBC at least through the next few years. Great decision, in my opinion. Leigh Diffey is an absolutely talented commentator, one of the best commentators in the business. He's not only commentated in some NASCAR races, but he's the main commentator for the IndyCar races and the IMSA races, and also has commentated some Olympic events as well, and does a great job in those. Leigh Diffey is one of the best commentators around the world and absolutely deserves ascension in the commentary booth. I think he's one of the best ever to do it at the moment. The last 15 years especially, he's been doing it for like 20 years at least, and he's been doing an incredible job really since the beginning. So amazing to see for sure. Congratulations to him on getting an extension with NBC. I'm glad to see he's going to be continuing working them for the long term for sure. And happy to see Leigh Diffey will continue working with NBC. It's a great decision, and he's a great person to be working with, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Jeb Burton and Roger Crouf. Now, after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, and we've got a lot of fights to talk about, but let's first start talking about Jeb Burton and Roger Crouf. Now, after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, Jeb Burton and Roger Crouf got into a very heated argument with each other. Jeb Burton was one that was a little bit angry. I'm not really sure what happened. It seems to be stemmed from contact that happened on the racetrack. Roger was having a very solid performance, and Jeb Burton, we talk about later in this episode, he wasn't having the best performance in the world. So it seemed like he was really, really angry about that. Now, Jeb Burton has got into it with a lot of drivers this year. Noah Gragson's one to be named. He's also, I think, got into Justin Allgaier this year, and also has gotten into with other drivers, including his own teammate, Anthony Alfredo. Jeb Burton's been very, very angry this year, and he has a lot of aggression built up. I think a lot of it's due to the fact that we don't even know where his future is going to be for 2023, but we don't really know what happened. But it's interesting to see that Jeb Burton was really, really angry, but I'm not entirely shocked and surprised that he got angry, because sometimes we see drivers get angry on pit road, but it is what it is, and hopefully he can get that anger checked, because it seems like he was really, really angry, and he's been angry all year, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're talking about Alex Bowman. Now, Alex Bowman earlier today spoke to the media and says he's starting to feel 100% and he feels 100% confident and he's ready to go to get back behind the wheel. Now, Alex Bowman, of course, will be driving the 48 car this upcoming race at Phoenix for the championship race. He has been medically cleared to race this weekend and will be back behind the wheel of the 48 car for this upcoming race at Phoenix. Really awesome. Alex Bowman is getting back behind the wheel, and he says he basically felt better than he did before the Texas race, which is awesome to see. Of course, Alex Bowman had multiple wrecks before his wreck at Texas, but he's been sitting out since the crash at Texas. But now he seems a lot better and a lot more focused. It's great to see Alex Bowman is back and basically fully recovered and ready to go. And I'm glad to see he's going to be back behind the wheel as well of the number 48 car. I think Bowman's a great driver. I don't know how he's going to perform. I don't expect Bowman to do incredible this weekend just because I think he's not really going to push it this weekend. But it's great to see that Alex Bowman is back. He feels 100%, and I'm very happy to see that Bowman is going to be back behind the wheel to drive the number 48 car. Really exciting to see for sure, and glad to see that Bowman is back behind the wheel of the 48 car. Very happy to see for sure. I'm glad to see he once again is driving the 48 car. Glad to see for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Keith Rodden. As it was announced on Friday that Keith Rodden is going to be the crew chief for Austin Dillon starting in 2023. Keith Rodden has been part of Hendrick Motorsports for many, many years, so he's been part of Chevy for a very, very long time, and crew chief for Kasey Kahne for the last 2 years as well. Then I believe a crew chief 1 year for William Byron, and then he's basically been working inside of Hendrick Motorsports, I think as an engineer for the last few years, and now will be transitioning over to work with Rich Schultz Racing and Austin Dillon. I'm going to be for real. I don't think that Keith Rodden is the greatest crew chief in the world. He's not the worst crew chief I've ever seen. I think Chris Heroy, who was a crew chief for Juan Montoya, really takes that role as the worst crew chief I've ever seen. But Keith Rodden really is not that great of a crew chief, in my opinion, and I don't know if this is going to help hurt Austin Dillon. Now, obviously, of course, Justin Alexander, he's not going to be returning to the team. Of course, well, he's going to be returning, but he's not going to be a crew chief next year. He'll be more inside, basically behind the scenes at Richard Childress Racing. I'm not sure what Keith Rodden's going to do, but I'll be perfectly honest. I don't expect much from Keith Rodden going into 2023. I don't know if he's going to do a good enough job to help Austin Dillon make the playoffs. Austin Dillon made it this year, and I'm not sure if he is going to be able to make the playoffs in 2023 with Keith Rodden. To be honest with you, I'm not expecting him to make the playoffs in 2023. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're going to go ahead and talk about the 2023 Busch Clash. Now, it was reported by Bob Pockrass on Friday evening that the 2023 Busch Clash, unlike the 2022 Busch Clash, is actually going to be a prime time race. So the race is going to start at 8 p.m. Eastern, the main event, and 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. This means that this race, like I said, is going to be a prime time event. This is a fantastic and great decision, in my opinion. Here's why. This originally, when 2022 was going to be a primetime event, but for whatever reason, they decided to move this to a day event, at least on the West Coast. But now you're going to make this a primetime event under the lights, which is what it should have been. It's been a primetime event for many, many years, except the last 2 years when it was in Daytona, except in 2020 and 2021. I think it's a great decision to have it under lights. I think it is get more people to be really, really intrigued, and more people will be able to tune in as well. And you're going to get a bigger audience that's going to be able to tune into the event. So overall, I think this is a fantastic decision that Fox has done. I think Fox had some decent decisions overall as of recently. They don't always make the greatest decision as well. Don't get me wrong. But I think it is definitely a fantastic decision for sure to make it a night race and a primetime event in 2023. Really good decision, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, is we're going to talk about the next-gen car. Now, Bozy Tatarevic, who's an engineer who works with works with the 14 team in IMSA in the GT class, he basically posted on Twitter about the next-gen car, and there's some new crash test footage that has basically come out. Now, if you take a look at the footage that has been revealed, if you look at the old design at 33 miles an hour, there's basically no crush zones, and the car basically doesn't flatten. If you look on the other side, which is the new design, there's actually some crush zones. This is going to be much better for the driver, especially when it comes, because one of the things is in the rear of these cars, they don't really have any crush zones, but the new designs that are going to be coming in 2023, the plan is to have some more crush zones on the car where it doesn't have an issue where the fuel will catch on fire, but basically the goal is to make sure it's more crush zones so the driver doesn't feel as much of the impact. One of the big issues this year with the next-gen car is drivers have been feeling a lot more of the impact. And I think the goal of this new change is coming is to make sure that basically there is less of that. There's still going to be a little bit of those hits the drivers being able to take and really be taken, which isn't great, but it said it's 50% reduction. You want to try to get that, I think, that down to 75 or 80%, but still overall, it's a lot better, and it's good to see that the NASCAR is continuing to work on that, and definitely for sure a lot more happier to see that basically they've got that crash test footage that has come out, and it's very good to see and awesome to see for sure that we've gotten some of that crash test footage. In my honest opinion, really great to see for sure. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jeb Burton. As it was announced, and he announced on Friday, that Jeb Burton will not be returning to our motorsports in 2023 and will be looking for a new ride starting in 2023. Jeb Burton, what's very interesting is he had a multi-year contract with his team and was supposed to stay with the team for 2023. And he does have sponsorship or funding. But I do think one of the biggest reasons why I think this is happening is, one, Jeb Burton has not lived up to expectations this year. I think one of the goals for Jeb Burton heading into 2022 is they were expecting Jeb Burton was probably going to make the playoffs or come close to making the playoffs and having a couple of their drivers, including Anthony Alfredo, make the playoffs. But unfortunately for Jeb Burton, he just hasn't really lived up those expectations, and he has crashed a ton of cars this year. Granted, not all the times have been his fault, but he has still caused a lot of junk on the racetrack and these cars to get junk, which is not a good thing for an organization. So I think that's a big reason why he's not returning. Now, the big question for Jeb Burton is, where is he going to end up driving in 2023? Honestly, I really don't know. Maybe he goes back down to the Truck Series. Maybe he drives for Brandonville Motorsports and drives a 68 car next year. Who really knows at this point? But it definitely is unfortunate for sure that he is not returning to the team next year. But when you're not running as good and you've crashed a lot of cars and the team needs to find a way to save money, even if you're bringing sponsorship or funding, they're unfortunately going to cut you. And it's definitely unfortunate to see that he is not returning to the organization, but it is what it is, and hopefully he's able to find a ride for 2023. It's unfortunate he will not be returning to our motorsports next year, but it is what it is, and hopefully he'll be able to find a ride next year to continue racing, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Mexican Grand Prix. Now, the Mexican Grand Prix was earlier today, and no surprise here, Max Verstappen won the Mexican Grand Prix. He won his 34th career Formula One race today and picks up his 14th win of the 2022 season. That is the most wins ever in a Formula One season, so he's broken a record in that area. Huge congratulations to Max Verstappen on picking up the victory. Max Verstappen has just been incredible this year, of course, already has clinched the 2022 championship. Has just been very fun to watch so far this year in Formula One. He's definitely on track for sure to have the most wins in Formula One the way it's going, and it's crazy Max Verstappen is he's only 25 years old and having 34 career wins in Formula One and still 2 chances to get that 2 more victories. Could have 36 by the end of the year. He is already basically, I think, in 5th or 6th on the all-times win list, and with 2 championships already, he's already being considered one of the greatest drivers in Formula One history. So absolutely congratulations to him for sure, and very happy to see Max Verstappen get another victory, and he won the Mexican Grand Prix. Massive congratulations to Max Verstappen. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Busch. Now, Kyle Busch in the Cup Series race at Martinsville had a really horrendous performance. Kyle Busch was probably the slowest I've ever seen him run in a race. It's almost as bad as when Dale Jr. had that really bad performance in the 2009 Coca-Cola 600. At one point, Kyle Busch was running last on pace and was 4 laps down by lap 200 of the race. Samantha Busch basically put out a tweet earlier today, and she was very unhappy and was not very happy with Joe Gibbs. It's obviously known at this point that Kyle Busch is very unhappy with Joe Gibbs. He's liked a couple tweets basically showing his frustration at Joe Gibbs and has been very upset with Joe Gibbs, especially over the last few months and with how everything's gone, especially since he basically announced that he's not going to be returning to the team in 2023 as he's going to be transitioning over to Richard Childress Racing. This upcoming race at Phoenix is going to be the last race that he is officially going to be running for Joe Gibbs Racing, as he'll be, like I said, transitioning over to Richard Childress Racing. It's definitely really unfortunate to see that. I think Joe Gibbs Racing is really giving Kyle Busch the short end of the stick, especially after being the most successful driver at the team. Of course, scoring 60 victories for the organization, whether basically like 60 wins in the organization's cup history, including all the exhibition races that he's won, and just the success that he has had. It really is unfortunate to see that Kyle Busch is really going out this way with Joe Gibbs. He definitely did not want to go out this way, but definitely it is what it is for sure. And again, it's very unfortunate to see that this is like, again, it's very difficult to see that this is the way things are going out for Kyle Busch, but it definitely is what it is in regards to that. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. I'm not surprised this is how things are going out, unfortunately. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Austin Hill and Maya Snyder. Now, after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race happened, we got footage of a fight that took place between Austin Hill and Maya Snyder. Both of them apparently are having a conversation. Maya Snyder was told by Austin Hill basically to back off. And then Austin Hill pretty much just came in. I don't know if you can say he sucker punched him or not, but basically he went up and straight up punched Maya Snyder basically and got onto a fight on pit road. It is currently unclear at this particular point if we're going to see any sort of penalties that do come from this, because NASCAR has basically gone and reviewed the footage earlier today. For whatever reason, they didn't review the footage considering it was already getting popular on social media, but it's unclear if there are penalties coming. Now, this is resulting of contact that happened near the end of the race where Maya Snyder got turned by Austin Hill. Of course, Austin Hill, who was going to be needing to make it a championship for, who was outside of the line and was going to be needing a lot of points, and unfortunately was in the middle of the pack, and was one of the big reasons that massive big one happened on the backstretch late in the race. It's really unfortunate what happened near the end. And again, seeing these guys fight on pit road, I don't know if there's going to be penalties that come from that. I wonder if Austin is going to get any sort of penalties, though. I don't know if he's going to get penalties. We've seen fights on pit road consistently, and I don't know if NASCAR will penalize him for that, but we could see penalties coming for the wreck on the back front stretch. But honestly, I don't know if there's anything that's going to come from this, but it's definitely interesting for sure to basically see that we saw that fight on pit road. It's just wild to see all the stuff's been going down over the last couple of days. And obviously, Austin Hill's definitely a fault for the wreck. And he basically said later that he said a few things, told him basically back up. He said he kept nagging and nagging and nagging on. And then eventually he said something that really got him basically set up. And that's what made him really, really upset. Definitely unfortunate for sure to see what happens, and hopefully these two can basically get over exactly what has happened between them. But it is what it is. I don't know if we're going to see them two have more problems, but we'll have to wait and see for sure what happens in the future if we see more tempers flaring for them next week at Phoenix. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as once again we're talking about Austin Hill. As it was announced on Friday that Austin Hill will be driving for Beer Motorsports part-time in the Cup Series in 2023 for 6 races. Those 6 races are the Daytona 500, Talladega, the Chicago Street Course, Michigan, Daytona in the summer, and Talladega in the fall. First of all, really happy to see Austin Hill getting more Cup experience. I really thought it would be with the third RCR car. There's been some rumblings and rumors that RCR could run a third car on a part-time basis in 2023. But it's good to see that Austin Hill is getting more Cup experience. Of course, Beer Motorsports does have an affiliation with Childs Racing, so it does make a lot of sense so for him to drive that car. Very interested in to go with a driver from like Las Vegas to drive the car like a Riley Herbst, but it's great to see that they're going to have him basically taking the ride, especially since he's a really good super speedway racer of how good he's been in the Xfinity Series. You know he's going to have a really good chance of making the Daytona 500. But it also helps the number of cars that will be in the Daytona 500. This confirms at least 37 or 38 entries that 100% for sure are going to be racing in the Daytona 500 next year, and there potentially could be more that could race in the Daytona 500 in 2023. So really awesome to see for sure. What's also great to see is the fact that Beer Motorsports is expanding their schedule, and they're not just going to be running the super speed races, but they're running the Chicago Street Course, and they're also going to run at Michigan, which Beer Motorsports, I don't think has entered Michigan like in a very long time, or race outside of super speedway in many, many years. And it's great to see that they're also going to be running a road course as well, which will help the entry list for those races. It's great to see a small team like this entering in more races, and hope we can see more teams go full-time and run more races in 2023. I just think this is really, really cool and really fascinating to see. And again, it really awesome to see Beer Motorsports going for it. I think they got a really good chance for sure to make Daytona 500. I hope they run that Wendy CA again, because Kyle Williams did a really good job. Ryan Williams, I should say, is one. I think, to design those schemes. He did a really awesome job designing those paint schemes. So I really hope Austin Hill can basically do a good job for the team, and very excited to see for sure that Austin Hill is going to be driving the 62 for Beer Motorsports for those select races. Really amazing and exciting to see for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tony Stewart. Now, Tony Stewart this past weekend competed in the NHRA event in Las Vegas, competing in top field. And after that run, Tony Stewart seems to be still really frustrated and mad at NASCAR. He basically was speaking and basically said, I'm basically glad that I'm running this. I've had more fun this weekend than I've had in a very, very long time. And I'm glad I'm not in something that really requires fenders. Another shot at NASCAR. Tony Stewart has obviously been more and more frustrated with NASCAR. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, how Tony Stewart is right now currently unhappy at NASCAR. There's a lot of reasons why I think he's unhappy at NASCAR. Number one, his team got penalized really, really heavily, and they basically upheld those Cole Custer penalties this past weekend. So I'm not surprised there. Also, NASCAR basically told Tony Stewart that we're not going to be returning. Well, basically, they told when he got told that they were going to Bristol Dirt, Tony Stewart pulled Eldora back. Tony Stewart did not want the Truck Series going to Bristol Dirt, and then they went to Eldora. Obviously, Tony Stewart's really also pissed off at Gene Haas currently at the moment because Gene Haas, basically what's going on with Gene is Gene basically wants to keep Cole Custer in the 41, but Tony Stewart wants Ryan Preece in the 41, and multiple drivers have been getting hurt, including former drivers like Kurt Busch announced retirement. He's a former driver, Stewart Haas Racing, and Kevin Harvick's probably on the verge of retiring as well. I don't know when it will happen. I don't also be shocked, surprised next year Tony Stewart does pull his stock and pulls away from Stewart Haas Racing and just jumps out of NASCAR completely and focuses on the NHRA. There's things NASCAR needs to be done for sure, and honestly, not shocked or surprised to see that basically this has unfortunately happened for Tony Stewart, quintessentially. So I'm not surprised or shocked that Tony Stewart's frustrated and mad at NASCAR. I'm really not surprised to see for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're going to talk about the 48 car for Big Machine Racing. As Big Machine Racing has officially announced their driver for the 2023 season, and that driver is going to be Parker Kligerman. They announced on Saturday that Parker Kligerman is going to drive the 48 for Big Machine Racing in 2023. This is going to be the first time that Parker Kligerman has been full-time in any of NASCAR's top-tier divisions since 2013 when he drove for Kyle Busch Motorsports in the Xfinity Series and drove the number 77 car. In addition to running full-time for Big Machine Racing in 2023, Parker Kligerman is going to drive part-time for Henderson Motorsports in 2023 in a truck series. Unclear how many races he'll drive in trucks. I would think he's going to drive a majority of the season like he did this year. Of course, he picked up a very important victory in Mid-Ohio and has been very, very solid. So he'll continue to drive for Henderson Motorsports in 2023 on a part-time basis. And also, he'll be working with NBC on Sundays as well. So he won't be doing any more of the Xfinity Series coverage going forward because he'll be running full-time in that series next year. But he'll be driving once again full-time in Xfinity. I am so pumped up and extremely excited for Parker Kligerman. I don't think people realize how really I've been wanting Parker Kligerman to drive full-time in Xfinity for a long time. I've been begging for him to get an opportunity. Not only is that guy a really friendly individual and a really hard-working individual, but he's been driving part-time in the truck series this year. He has been doing an incredible job. He won with Henderson Motorsports at Mid-Ohio, and there's been a lot of rumors he was going to potentially go full-time back in trucks. I did not think he'd be going full-time in Xfinity, but Ice is the guy I really wanted to be part of this Big Machine Racing organization. I thought someone else would get it, though, but I'm really pumped they've chosen Parker as a driver. Parker's a driver, I think, because he always gets the best out of his equipment. I think Parker Kligerman will contend for the playoffs next year, and not only that, I think Parker Kligerman is not only going to get one win next year, but I think he's going to get two race victories with Big Machine Racing. He's a really good driver who knows how to get the best out of his equipment, and I expect big things from Parker Kligerman heading into 2023. He's such a good driver. And I remember that one time when he drove for Gone Bros Racing, I think it was 2 years ago in the 96 car. He was wheeling that car to potential top 10 run, ended up finishing in the top 20, had pure speed where he's tending for a top 10. It was really, really incredible to watch. This is a really good opportunity. I think especially with the fact that likely Ty Gibbs, Noah Gragson for sure, and Allmendinger are all going up, there's going to be less of that competition for Parker. Of course, he's going to have to deal with all the junior motorsports cars next year, and they're getting a big acquisition of Brandon Jones next season. You're obviously going to have Sammy Smith more than likely next year, John Hunter Nemechek. You're going to have all three call guys you're going to have to go up against, and probably, of course, Ryan Sieg and Jeremy Clements as well. But I think Parker Kligerman could definitely beat the odds. He's a really good road course racer as well, so he's going to put up a lot of great work for the 48 team, and I'm so pumped up and so excited to see that he's going full-time once again in Xfinity. Like I said, I expect big things from Parker going into 2023. Bigger than what I thought Landon Castle would do. Landon, I thought, was going to do a little better with Big Machine Racing. Of course, they've already won this year with Tyler Reddick earlier this year in Texas, and this team is really headed toward the right direction, and they made a really good decision to bring one full-time guy in, and of course, that's a really talented driver in Parker Kligerman, because he's not really that old. He's only 30 or 31 years of age, so he's a very young driver who's got so much potential to do great things in the sport still, and one day maybe he'll go back to being in a really good car in the Cup Series. Great decision, in my opinion. Fantastic acquisition for the team, and I'm so excited to see that Parker Kligerman is once again driving full-time in NASCAR. First time in 10 years, by the way, in 2023. Big Machine is not regretting the decision, because I think this is a fantastic decision for the team, and amazing to see for sure that he's back behind the wheel driving full-time in NASCAR once again. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first of three major stories in today's episode, as we're talking once again about Ty Gibbs and his contact with Brandon Jones. Now, if you watched a NASCAR Xfinity Series race yesterday or a couple days ago, you saw one of the most infamous moments I've seen in a very, very long time. On the final restart of the race, after all the chaos that happened for the last 40 or 50 laps, on the final restart of the race, Brandon Jones actually had the race lead. Ty Gibbs was right behind him, and we started seeing a lot of bumping and banging happening between Brandon Jones and Ty Gibbs. On the last lap of the race, Ty Gibbs basically going into turn number one, basically just straight up dumps his teammate into turn number one and completely takes out his teammate. Now, a lot of people, including commentators and many people on social media, have really expressed their frustration with this move, and I've really expressed my frustration with this move on my channel earlier this week. After the race, Brandon Jones basically spoke to the media, and he said he considered Ty Gibbs a friend, and he lost a lot of respect. I'm very surprised that Brandon Jones did not go beat the crap out of him for that, because he honestly deserves to beat the crap out of him, even though Gray said he probably should go beat the shit out of him, because that's what he should honestly do, in my opinion, because what Ty Gibbs did was completely unacceptable and was absolutely ridiculous to see. The crew absolutely booed him and was really, really mad. They were even chanting basically in the stands. Multiple people were going saying, "Let's go, Grandpa. Thanks, Grandpa. And thank you, Grandpa." That was just funny to see, definitely, for sure. And they were not very happy. And in driver intros earlier today, they were really, really unhappy at the Cup driver intros. Now, Ty Gibbs later that evening went on Sirius XM NASCAR radio, and he kind of compared himself to Jesus. Yes, I'm not even kidding. If you listen to an interview with Claire B. Lane, he compares himself to Jesus. Ty Gibbs, I like Ty Gibbs. Let me say this about Ty. I like him a lot. But Ty Gibbs has made a lot of ridiculous moves and a lot of ridiculous mistakes. And this dude always basically apologizes for everything and says he's sorry about a lot of these issues, and then he tries to compare himself to Jesus. Dude, you're not fooling anybody. Number one, I know you're a Christian individual, but don't compare yourself to Jesus. Second thing, own up to your mistakes and take responsibility for your mistakes. Not to mention, you've got a lot of Cup guys and a lot of former drivers really unhappy with you. Todd Bodine shared his frustration, saying he lost all respect for him after the incident. David Reagan was very unhappy on social media, was very pissed off and was angry and said, "I hope these young kids don't learn to race like that." Eric Jones basically echoed the same thing, of course, a former driver at Joe Gibbs Racing. Denny Hamlin basically saying, "I wish JD was alive because he would not have put up with that stuff." I think Kyle Busch spoke out about this. Kyle Larson said it was embarrassing. We'll talk about another thing he was really embarrassed about. But we saw a lot of drivers just really frustrated and really outspoken about the move. Now, a lot of people are wondering if NASCAR was going to penalize Ty Gibbs for the move. NASCAR will not penalize the move. I think it's the right call personally. But I think that NASCAR better be prepared that if Brandon Jones intentionally wrecks Ty Gibbs, even if they're teammates, they should not go ahead and penalize Brandon Jones. Do not penalize him for that because he deserves. It's retaliation, in my opinion, and well-deserved retaliation. If he just puts him in a wall, that's deserved, in my opinion. I think he should just race like a junior motorsports driver since he's going to be racing junior motorsports next year, and he's got nothing to lose. And drivers, like I said, a lot of even Xfinity guys like Noah Gragson, Justin Allgaier, they're very unhappy with the move. And Josh Berry, who is, of course, going to be a teammate of Brandon Jones next year, he was very unhappy as well. Ty Gibbs is going to have a very rude awakening going into Cup full time next year when he does drive that 18 car. And he's going to fit that 18 car very well because the driver of the 18 car, currently Kyle Busch, gets booed a lot. I think he's going to fit that moniker of being the new Kyle Busch when it comes to getting booed a lot. it's just a frustrating to see because Ty Gibbs has all this talent. He's gotten 10 wins. But what he did was completely unjustified and completely unacceptable, in my opinion. And like I said this, he's going to have a rude awakening, and he's going to have a hard time racing a Cup. There's already drivers that are mad at him. Erik Jones, he's gotten into it with him. He's already issues on pit road. And I thought Ty Gibbs was showing so much more maturity as years progress. But he hasn't really improved on that maturity. And he's going to learn the hard way when he gets the Cup next year. At the end of the day, he's going to be in Cup next year more than likely, and he's a good driver, and he's probably going to win races, but his average finish at Cup, 23.2. It didn't really go down by much to today as well. I think he had like a 20th place finish at Martinsville. So he's going to have to learn a lot. He had police escorts coming into the track. I don't think it took till Kyle Busch's third year to have police escorts coming to track. So make of that what you will, but definitely for sure, really frustrating situation overall. And it does suck because he's a good driver, but he's got to learn not to be the way he is, and he's going to have to learn the hard way for sure and stop being the way he is, in my opinion. And he's going to have to learn the hard way for sure, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story in today's episode as we're talking about Ross Chastain. Now, if you watched a NASCAR Cup Series race earlier today or yesterday when you're watching this video, you saw probably one of the most insane moves in NASCAR history. Now, let's set back to the precedent. So, Christopher Bell had the race lead in the race at the time. Ross Chastain, because he was way behind Denny Hamlin and didn't get enough points in the stages while Denny Hamlin swept the stages, Ross Chastain was actually 5 points below the cutoff line going into the final laps of the race. As they're coming to the white flag of this race, Ross Chastain was 10th at the time, and Denny Hamlin was running in 5th. Denny Hamlin was trying to pass Brad Keselowski at time for 4th. Brad Keselowski would get DQ'd later. Ross Chastain decides to pull one of the most bonsai and incredible moves I've ever seen in NASCAR history. He wall rides and pulls off an incredible video game move and gets up to 5th position, now 4th position in the race, ends up advancing to the championship 4 with that move. That means that Ross Chastain, Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, who won the race, by the way, at Martinsville, and Joey Logano will all be racing for a championship at Phoenix. Many drivers actually reacted to this move. Chase Briscoe saying that it was a fair move and a very, very controversial move. NASCAR probably should step in the penalty, basically not let that kind of stuff happen. But basically, that they said that it was a fair move in his opinion. Joey Logano said that was a really wild and pretty cool move, but basically said that we should not see that ever happen again, and NASCAR should step in to make a move. Kyle Larson actually had something that was very interesting. A guy who has done wall riding in the past, he actually reacted saying that is a very big embarrassment for the sport, what Ross Chastain did, and basically said that move better not be reincarnated, and because already embarrassed him the day before, and said that move was really, really bad. I disagree with Kyle Larson a little bit. I will say I was fully disagreeing with Kyle Larson, but he does have a point. We don't want that move happening at all times, and they probably should do something about it. That being said, going back and talking about Ross Chastain's move, this move for sure that Ross Chastain pulled is probably one of the greatest NASCAR moves, if not the greatest moves I've ever seen in NASCAR history. I have never seen a move like that done, and I was just, when that move happened, I was completely just speechless and completely shocked. And not only that, you've got so many people who are currently talking about this move overall. And honestly, if I'm in NASCAR's position when it comes to a move like this, I'm definitely using this as promotion for Martinsville. And the way that the sport has been talked about in a much more positive light, especially what happened yesterday with Ty Gibbs, the fact that this sport is being talked more positively and what Ross Chastain did, I don't think any driver, maybe other than Kyle Larson, it's kind of hypocritical Larson did, but he did say he was kind of embarrassed. What Ross Chastain did was one of the most impressive things I have genuinely ever seen in my 15 years as being a NASCAR fan. Like I said, I've been a fan for 15 years since 2007. And I don't think I've seen a driver ever pull a move like that. And I don't think a lot of fans who've been watching for years have never seen a driver do the things that Ross Chastain does. Whether you like Ross Chastain or not, you always have to be impressed with what Ross Chastain does. This guy will pull some moves out of his butt. He's a very aggressive driver, but he's not afraid. And I think the reason he does such a good job and is so aggressive as a driver, he really puts it all on for the team and gives his all. And now in just his first year of Trackhouse Racing, because last year he was very solid at Chip Ganassi Racing and did pretty good, but at the end of the year, you have to remember, he was pretty good at Chip Ganassi Racing. He didn't really show his stuff until basically going over to Trackhouse. And it's just been an incredible year for Ross Chastain. And this guy, yes, he's had a lot of aggression. He's had a lot of feuds with a lot of drivers this year. And while some drivers are upset with the move, and some drivers thought that was a crazy move for sure. The wall riding he did, I think what Ross Chastain did was generally so cool to watch and so entertaining to see. And I think Ross Chastain, you got to look at him being a favorite to win the championship for sure going into Phoenix. Chastain was really fast at Phoenix, actually nearly won the last time we were at Phoenix. I think some people are probably putting him as a favorite with all the momentum he's got going into this weekend. And he's had a very solid playoffs for sure. Finished second earlier this year at Vegas, almost won there. He finished second, of course, at a Homestead, had a shot at winning there, and gets a top 5 finish. Finishes fourth. So we had 3 straight top 5 finishes, and he's looked really, really good in these playoffs for sure. So I cannot believe that move happened. That was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen in NASCAR history, and he wall rides into the championship for just amazing to see for sure. A fantastic move, and again, one of the greatest moves in NASCAR history, period. Some people are going to frown upon that move, and I know some drivers really wanted that move to be punished and a rule coming in. I wouldn't be surprised in NASCAR in the long-term sense of rule. NASCAR, of course, they are not going to be penalizing for the move. They announced that later in the evening that they're not going to be penalizing him for the move. I'm glad they're not going to be penalizing him for the move because I thought that was really, really fun to watch, but I'm glad that they're not penalizing him. And overall, a great move by Ross Chastain, but also a very crazy move to see for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace once again. Now, Bubba Wallace, of course, is returned from his suspension. He had a really strong run this past weekend in Martinsville. I think he ended up finishing 8th, crossed the finish line in 8th position, actually crossed the finish line 9th, but didn't end up finishing 8th position after Brad Keselowski was DQ'd. Now, before that, Bubba Wallace actually spoke to the media this past weekend after returning, and he did a really good job interviewed by the media, much better than he did this past week. Bubba Wallace actually said to the media that he said he had a really good conversation with Kyle Larson. They said they're really on good terms. And I think they're both really good friends, by the way, but they had a really great conversation and are on much better terms going forward. He also said, or Jeff Clark reports this too, that he sets the penalties by NASCAR, but wants more consistency when it comes out, which I 100% agree. I think if you rival somebody down the straightaway going forward, it doesn't matter how fast you're going. I think that it's really basically important that you basically penalize a driver and suspend him and do the same penalty that gave Bubba Wallace, or just uphold the penalty, increase the number of races that someone gets suspended. Because if you rival somebody down the straightaway, in my opinion, no matter how fast or slow you go, that should definitely be a penalty, in my opinion. Now, how Bubba Wallace has handled this in last week especially, I know what he basically did was unacceptable at Las Vegas to Kyle Larson. Not basically the pushing and shoving. Yes, he pushed official, but basically, I don't know if that's the worst thing, but basically going out and basically, right rearing somebody down the straightaway. I've said it basically all year. It is completely unacceptable, in my opinion. But how Bubba Wallace handled this past weekend is how drivers should handle, and it's really good to see how Bubba Wallace has generally been able to handle this situation. Yes, he got booed a lot today in driver interest, which was expected. But the great thing for Bubba Wallace is that Bubba Wallace, I think, going forward as a driver, he's just got to keep his head up high. And we've already heard Denny Hamlin say this, but I agree with Denny Hamlin. I think Bubba Wallace, throughout a majority of this year, he has really showed major improvement, especially after Nashville. He really had issues I remember him having issues, I think, on pit road to Kansas. He comes back and said, it's whatever. Guess what? That same race, he goes on and wins. And before all these issues, he was having a really strong playoffs and was extremely consistent. And in his 45 teams, has been improving. And I think Bubba Wallace knows. He basically said it was a really humbling experience for him. And he basically said what I've been saying. I think Bubba Wallace is a very talented driver who's got a lot of potential going into next year. And I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if he gets 2 wins. And again, he had a great performance today, was running near the top 5, actually near the end of the race in the last 50 laps. And that 45 car, while it was very difficult to get through the field at least early, he was showing a lot of speed throughout the day and really was not mad on the radio as well. Didn't race everybody over aggressive. Did a really good job being clean out there today and did a fantastic job. And I think this is a right start for a lot of media. And a lot of media today as well, including Kyle Petty, even was really happy with how Bubba Wallace really conducted himself and really handled himself. So I'm very happy and pleased to see that NASCAR, and basically, again, it was a right call. And I think NASCAR did a great thing by going ahead and suspending him for that move. But also, same time, I'm very happy to see. I really, hopefully, for sure, hoping this is the end of the Bubba Wallace saga, and we can just focus on Bubba Wallace's performance on track, which, like I've already said, Bubba, outside of the situations, had a great year. He's already picked up victory, and now Bubba Wallace's focus is to finish out this last race this upcoming weekend at Phoenix, the championship race, And his focus is going to be trying to go out there and try to get a win and get a chance at getting another win for the team in the 45 car, which I think of the pace and speed that especially a 45 car genuinely had at Phoenix where they ran top 5 near the end of the race. I certainly think Bubba Wallace could definitely be a threat for sure to win and basically steal a win. We could have a wild ending where we have a 3-wide finish across the line where you have the winner of the race, the champion, be noticed champion like Kyle Larson, and then of course you could have someone else like a Chase Elliott win the championship, and you could have 3 champions, which 3 drivers coming across the line, the guy who wins the race. That could be definitely really, really crazy for sure. But how Bubba Wallace has handled it. Even Lewis Hamilton gave advice today before not today, but a couple days ago, speaking to media, he said Bubba's just got to not let it get to him. And I think it's been another thing that's been important for Bubba. He's got to stay off social media. That's one of the big things. Social media can be extremely toxic. I've known that for many, many years being on social media for as long as I've been on the social media platforms. He's got to basically handle that pressure in situations and just continue to basically focus on being a better race car driver and just focusing on trying to go out there and perform and prove these people wrong and show he's got talent, because Bubba Wallace is a very talented race car driver. I don't know if he's ever going to win a championship, let's be honest. But Bubba Wallace is a very good and a great driver and someone that really could lead the sport long term if he continues to improve. And I think he's someone who's got so much potential to do great things. Sport get a lot of wins in this series, and I'm hoping Bubba Wallace can continue to show that genuine improvement as a race car driver. So I'm glad he spoke to the media. Said he spoke to Kyle Larson. Very happy to see it for sure. I'm glad to see that him and Kyle Larson are on speaking terms finally. And again, I hope this is all over at this particular point. I'm glad to see he's doing a lot better as a race car driver for sure, and I hope he will continue to improve as a driver. So there's today's long NASCAR and motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below over that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Bubba Wallace speaking to media, and do you think he handled the media today really, really well? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about all the other things we talked about today, including Ross Chassain's wild wall riding move? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, we have the NASCAR Xfinity Series Championship predictions, where I'll tell you who I think will win the championship. Then on Wednesday, we're going to have a double upload day. We're going to have the Cup one. We'll talk about the championship reactions, and then we'll also have a news video. Thursday is going to be the race picks video, and we've got a lot of other content on the way as well that I think you're going to enjoy. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.